Hello there. My name is Ramsley, and welcome to the pit. Today, I have the pleasure of bringing to you, the Fiend's updated 2021, post-CCU, Masterclass style guide to the Highlander. As with our previous guide, this video aims to be a complete and detailed account of the Highlander strategy. Everything in that video will be covered again here, but there will also be updated information that reflects the changes that have occurred within For Honor over the past year. This guide assumes that you understand the basics of For Honor combat. Some terminology or game jargon may be used, and Highlander's basic moveset will not be covered. This guide will be split up into a few major sections. First, we will discuss Highlander's various punishes. Then we will move on to a discussion and demonstration of his advanced tech. Next, I will go over a vast array of strategies, playstyles, and general tips that you should consider when playing the claymore-wielding Scotsman. Finally, I will go over Highlander's various weaknesses and worst matchups with other heroes. Thank you warriors for joining us on this journey today. And now, it is time to begin. Highlander gets a light on guard break. He can also get the first part of his zone, but since the damage was decreased, this is now rarely worth the stamina cost. On a heavy parry, you get a free light. When you parry a light, you can get an offensive form heavy. To achieve this, you must hold your heavy input until you enter offensive stance. Then, immediately release. You are also guaranteed a kick, which in turn, guarantees your heavy. Do this to drain extra stamina or to ledge your opponent. On a wall splat, you are guaranteed an offensive or defensive heavy from any direction. At the time of making this video, all options do 30 damage. You must delay your input to get the defensive heavy without flowing into offensive stance. The timing of the defensive heavies is more difficult, but they require less stamina than the offensive heavy punish. Keep in mind that you can still get a defensive heavy even if you are out of stamina. To do this, you must release your heavy as soon as possible after your throw is initiated. When you are throwing or parrying an opponent who is out of stamina, your best punish is light attack, into offensive heavy, into your offensive form mix-ups. If you are low on stamina, you can also do light into defensive heavy for the same damage but no mix-up. This sometimes does not work if your guard is set to the left. Both Highlander's kick and his grab guarantee offensive form heavies, though his grab is far more punishable, and thus more dangerous to use. You should also know that a defensive top heavy is guaranteed after a wall splat from your kick. Whenever you find yourself dodge landing, be sure to keep in mind that you can only punish with a kick mid-combo if the opponent's next attack is a heavy or slow bash. Otherwise, you can perform an offensive light so you are not interrupted. There are some moves that can be punished with an offensive heavy directly, conserving the stamina that the kick would have cost you. Highlander has extremely powerful out-of-lock punishes. If you catch an opponent running, using a ballista, doing most executions, or doing an unlocked charge attack, you get free double defensive heavies, or Celtic Curse into a defensive heavy. Though this is obviously matchup specific, Highlander is currently guaranteed a free defensive heavy after dodging Shugoki's Demon Embrace. The first of Highlander's tech that we will cover is his iconic wave dashing. It is well known that Highlander has decreased post-dodge recovery while in offensive form. Though if you study a Highlander main, you may notice that they often switch their guard direction between each dodge. This is called wave dashing, and it allows the Highlander to even further decrease their dodge recovery. Under certain circumstances, this can act as a form of dodge option select, allowing the Highlander to dodge both options in a mix-up. For example, sometimes a Highlander in offensive form can dodge both Highlander's kick and his grab with a quick waved dash. When a Highlander uses his emote while in offensive form, it serves to cover up a possible guard switch as well as goad the opponent. When the emote is triggered, the animation and indicator movement are covered up, enabling either a surprise attack or a highly effective feint. This might not really be tech, but Highlander can soft feint his offensive heavies into an offensive light from the same side. This is mostly useless, as the parry timings overlap. Your offensive lights can be used to retreat quickly while staying in offensive stance. Though Highlander's zone attack is generally quite bad, it can be used as a zone option select parry. Be careful not to overdo this or you will very likely be punished for it. If you are really looking to perfect your offensive form gameplay, there is one more piece of high-level Highlander tech I have for you. Though in order to explain it properly, I must first fill you in on an old accidental nerf to offensive stance. Back before the offensive options select was removed, exiting offensive form was faster. There was no delay, allowing a Highlander to bait and then immediately parry an incoming attack. When the offensive option select was nerfed, they did it by adding a short recovery window to exiting offensive stance. Now you must allow a very small buffer window when exiting offensive stance before counter guard breaking or parrying an incoming attack. The wave switch allows Highlander to immediately exit offensive stance with no delay by cancelling immediately after a successful wave dash. When the wave dash cancels Highlander's dodge recovery, it cancels his offensive stance exit recovery as well. Highlander used to have a lot of tech that is no longer in the game or at least no longer functions as it did previously. This includes both the offensive stance option select and the infinite kick. If you would like to see examples of this old school Highlander tech, please refer to the previous guide linked in the description. Highlander also has various forms of, what I consider, bad tech, or things that I see as negatively impacting the enjoyability of the game. For example, Highlander can very easily flicker his defensive stance heavies, and with the proper input, he can also flicker almost any move in offensive stance. I will not demonstrate these kinds of tech in this guide, as I do not consider them to be healthy for the community. As a Highlander, you are going to have a couple of different game plans, mix-up ideas, etc. that go with you into each fight. Think of these as your bread and butter. These are general situations and play styles that you will inevitably find yourself in time and time again. The first thing we will discuss is fighting heroes who do not have any form of innate dodge attack. In these cases your kick to grab mix-up will most likely be your most effective option. Since the dodge must be inputted before the Highlander's soft feint animation is shown, your enemy must determine if you are going to feint via prediction rather than reaction. Basically, they have two choices only. Do they assume you are only going to do the kick and dodge? This would open them up to the grab soft feint. If they anticipate the soft feint, they can either throw out a light attack or wait until after the kick would have hit to dodge the grab. Many people would call this a 50-50, and in some ways it is, though the enemy could always throw out a light rather than try to dodge. Many heroes can escape this mix-up with either a backwalk heavy or a backwalk light. This type of option select will dodge the kick or interrupt the caber toss regardless of which option you choose. Next, we will discuss what happens when you find yourself up against a hero with dodge attacks. Essentially, your kick to grab is useless, though this has a few major exceptions that I will reveal shortly. In these fights, your mix-up becomes more like a game of rock paper scissors. Essentially, your mix-up has three main options. Instead of using your kick, you should use your offensive heavies. You can either feint to parry, feint to caber toss, or not feint at all. The idea is to steadily groom your opponent's expectations. Start by punishing their dodge attacks with your high damage light parries. Then, once they are afraid of dodge attacks, you start feinting to caber toss or guard break to catch their dodges. Eventually they will likely just do nothing and you can let the heavy fly for some direct damage. There are a few additional things that you must know about fighting dodge attack heroes. The first is that your crushing counters are a better punish against heavy dodge attacks such as those of Shaman, Shaolin, Kensei, Griffin and more. They do more damage, and since the CCU removed stamina drain on parry, there isn't really any reason not to use crushing counters to punish these dodge attacks. However, keep in mind that crushing counters are easily interrupted in 4 vs 4 game modes. Another important tip for using your offensive heavy mix-up is to anticipate zone option selects from your opponent. If an Orochi or a Kensei notices you are trying to bait a dodge attack, they will likely decide to option select your heavy instead of dodging, in which case you will need to feint and parry. Some heroes have dodge attack moves that affect Highlander's primary mix-ups in important ways. For example, side dodge bashes can normally be caught with Highlander's kick into grab or heavy feint kick. Aside from bashes, Highlander's kick to grab will catch Valkyrie, Gladiator, Warmonger, Zanhu, Peacekeeper, and Nobushi in their respective dodge attacks. It's weird, I know. Before we move away from Highlander's mix-ups, we have a few additional things to cover. Highlander's kick is no longer safe, and can now be punished with a guard break if dodged due to offensive stance exit recovery. You can avoid this by immediately kicking a second time to interrupt the guard break. You can also punish guard break attempts on your offensive heavy recoveries in this same manner. If you think your opponent will adapt to this by trying to interrupt your second kick with a light attack, you can dodge instead of doing the follow-up kick and punish the light attack from there. When your opponent is out of stamina, Highlander's offensive form mix-ups become even more devastating, and frankly cruel, but keep in mind that some opponents will attempt to interrupt you with an out-of-stamina light attack. When attacking an opponent who is out of stamina, you can still be punished for a missed caber toss, so to avoid this, consider using emote mix-ups with your kick to punish an opponent's dodge more safely. Now that we have thoroughly covered our primary offensive stance playstyles, it is time to talk about defensive stance. It used to be that the most effective way to fight a Highlander was to get right up in his face, harass him out of offensive, and turtle for a light parry. However, now that Highlander has 500 millisecond lights and powerful frame advantage granted by the CCU, his defensive stance playstyle has become a viable way to deal with matchups that shut down other forms of offense. Highlander's combo light is possibly one of the best light attacks in the game for a couple of important reasons. First, it has hyper armor, so it can be used as a tool to retake momentum during an opponent's mix-ups. Second, it has less combo delay than other chain lights, and so the timing feels faster than it should, and third, it has an increased hit stun value when compared with other light attacks. This is important for Highlander's kick, but I will explain more on that later on. This increased hit stun also means, however, that Highlander can retain positive frame advantage while continuously attacking in defensive form. Whether you end with a defensive heavy or stop and restart after a combo light, it will remain Highlander's turn until the opponent successfully counters an attack. Highlander's defensive lights are now the same speed as his offensive ones, but do more damage. Also, Highlander's offensive lights are enhanced so you can continue to pepper light attacks for as long as you want. This is why many people play him as a light spammer. Take this into account with Highlander's hyper armor defensive heavies, and you have a decently powerful playstyle that will be a nightmare for impatient opponents. Additionally, using defensive stance and double lights heavily will condition your opponents not to be watching for Highlander's kick when you decide to eventually use offensive stance again. However, you should note that defensive stance trades are significantly less viable after the CCU damage changes, as Highlander now does 30 damage on a defensive heavy. His health pool is already somewhat low, so be sure not to rely on trading unless you already have a substantial health lead. Alright, that is it for the primary playstyles section of this guide. I hope you are hanging in there. Let's take a break for just a second. I know this is a lot of information, so if you have additional questions about anything you see in this guide, I encourage you to join our Discord server linked in the description. We have a community of knowledgeable Highlanders who would love to give you a hand. Alright, it is time for a barrage of individual tips and general advice about playing the Highlander. Prepare yourself. If your opponent is up in your face parrying your light despite their speed increase, then your backward light is going to be your best friend. Here are the major ways you can make use of this powerful move. You can use it to flow into offensive stance, use it as an extra safe backstep crushing counter, use it to bait a punish attempt, or use it to trade with your defensive stance lights and heavies. Don't overuse it, but it is an extremely powerful tool. Alright, it is time to talk about why hit stun is important for landing Highlander's kick. If you try to kick your opponent immediately after landing your opener light attack, they have the ability to interrupt you with any 500 millisecond light, so almost any light in the game. Many people know this, so it is common for players to light attack as soon as they see a Highlander flowing into offensive stance. You can deny your opponent this opportunity by using your kick after a heavy, Celtic Curse, crushing counter, or chain light, all of which have enough hit stun to render Highlander's kick uninterruptible. Another question you might ask is when a Highlander should feint his offensive heavy to a kick versus feinting to a grab. First, it is important to know that the dodge timings of the heavy and the heavy to kick soft feint overlap, and so an opponent can dodge and accidentally cover both of these options. On the other hand, the soft feint to grab will catch the opponent if they dodge. Essentially, you want to feint to grab if they are more often trying to dodge your heavies while feinting to kick if they are more often trying to parry them. To complicate this idea even further, you want to use your feint to grab against heroes who are out of stamina or who have slow heavies such as another Highlander. In these situations, the feint to grab will catch them if they either dodge or parry, whereas the feint to kick would likely miss if they were to dodge. You can use your heavy to kick soft feint to catch side dodge bash moves such as those of Lawbringer and Conqueror. Outside of this, Highlander's kick soft feint is punishable with a guard break just like his caber toss. A popular Highlander playstyle is to quick switch into and back out of offensive stance in an attempt to bait and parry an opponent's light attack. Since this became more difficult after Highlander's old nerf, this playstyle can be further perfected by mastering the wave switch. Additionally, you can also disguise your offensive cancel by covering it with an offensive emote. Highlander's Celtic Curse is somewhat underrated. It can sometimes be used to dodge attacks, it has reliable hyper armor, it can be used as a roll catch, and the ability to soft feint it to offensive stance enables you to shut down counter attempts. Highlander's offensive form triple soft feint, heavy to kick to grab, is often quite effective against opponents who roll frequently or who are out of stamina. After landing a wall splat punish, quickly flow into and back out of offensive stance, and then immediately guard break again for a sneaky, double wall splat punish. Use offensive lights and weird guard switches to scare your opponent and bait them into dodging. When you are in offensive form and low on stamina, dodge backward and gain some distance. Wait a second or two. Your opponent will likely dodge forward to close the distance and you can get a free kick or heavy. Often, when you dodge toward an opponent in offensive stance, they will dodge backward in anticipation of a kick or offensive lights. A good Highlander tactic is, to the dismay of many, to hover some distance from the opponent and react to their attacks with offensive dodges and heavies. In these situations, the Highlander can intentionally whiff an offensive heavy to bait his opponent into attempting to punish it. Then the Highlander can dodge the punish attempt and get a free kick or light. Remember that when fighting a Highlander, or any hero with low recoveries, dodging an attack does not necessarily guarantee you a kick of your own unless you dodged very early. Instead, you can punish with an offensive light or use a kick to grab soft feint to catch their dodge. In a Highlander mirror match, the dodge battles are the stuff of legends. You should remember that you can heavily punish deflects with your defensive stance hyper armor heavies. Use frequent kicks and offensive lights to discourage guard breaks while you are in offensive form. If your opponent is spamming guard breaks, you can guarantee a defensive heavy by buffering a backstep heavy as soon as possible after you counter guard break. Now, to finish off the general tips section, let's talk about 4 vs 4. Despite his strong defense, Highlander struggles outside of duels because his moveset is so interruptible and because he feeds revenge like crazy. If you would like an edge on the battlefield, here are a few things you should know. While he is in offensive form and has revenge activated, Highlander cannot be guard broken except while in dodge or remote recovery. The rocksteady feat is Highlander's worst nightmare because it disables Highlander's kick to grab mix-up and denies him the ability to wall splat. However, Highlander does have a few ways to counter this feat. After a caber toss, when the opponent stands up early to parry your punish attempt, you can soft feint your punishing heavy and hit them with a kick. Also, Highlander can use kick-only mix-ups to replace caber toss in these situations. Target swapping with Celtic Curse can be a very effective tool in team fights. Though it is often a risk, Highlander's caber toss can be used as an effective ganking tool. Highlander is played most optimally by primarily guarding objectives and anchoring large fights, as his movement speed is extremely slow when huffing it around the map. That being said, I personally enjoy playing him most as a mid-lane hero. A good strategy with Highlander is to hover around fights in offensive stance and punish recoveries and gank setups with your unblockable heavies. Using your kicks when ganking will almost certainly give your opponent revenge. Now let's talk about feats and perks. My favorite feat setup is Fast Recovery, Winner's Advantage, Second Wind, and Fire Flask or Spear Storm depending on map selection. However, Bear Trap is technically much more optimal than Winner's Advantage, Rush is definitely worth considering, and Longbow and Fury are both reasonable options now that Second Wind has been nerfed. As far as perks go with Highlander, the top few are essentially the same as with any hero. Vengeful Barrier, Bulk Up, and Last Stand are the top 3 in my opinion. Congratulations, you've made it through the most difficult parts of this guide. Before we are finished, we will talk about Highlander's worst matchups and his various weaknesses as a hero. Though it is true that Highlander has a more difficult time fighting heroes with dodge attacks, there are some heroes whose matchups with him are particularly one-sided. For example, Zhang Jun and Tiandi are both difficult to beat due to their number of dodge attack options. Both can hard feint their dodge attacks and JJ has an additional soft feint that further complicates the matchup. Tiandi can endlessly chain his dodge attacks, and JJ can use a dodge into Sifu stance to avoid both Highlander's kick and his grab. Griffin is a difficult matchup for a lot of these same reasons. In these fights, guard break is going to be your best friend, but outside of this, sometimes the best you can do is try to be as unpredictable as possible and make the best reads that you can. Alright, the last thing we have to talk about is a list of Highlander's primary weaknesses. First, we have the high guard break vulnerability of Highlander's Celtic Curse. Because this move is initiated by first inputting a dodge, it is naturally vulnerable to being interrupted with a guard break. Be sure to keep this in mind or you will surely suffer the consequences. Highlander's slow movement speed impairs him heavily and feels entirely unnecessary. His zone attack is both extremely slow and still has a high stamina cost. It could use a rework to be viable in a 1 versus 1 scenario. He feeds a ton of revenge and is highly interruptible in 4 versus 4, for these reasons, many Highlander players choose to play him as a duel-only hero. Last, and most frustratingly of all, we have the unlock roll. This move makes it possible to wholly avoid Highlander's kick to grab mix-up despite past changes to the guard break on roll properties. You will be unable to stop an opponent from rolling out of your mix-up. Also, an opponent can sometimes dodge backward diagonally to avoid the kick to grab as well. Perhaps these issues may get fixed someday, but for now, you'll have to learn to work around these shortcomings. Once again, my name is Ramsley, and I hope you have both enjoyed and benefited from this updated masterclass style guide to the Highlander. The Fiend loves nothing more than to see the Highlander community grow and thrive in For Honor, so to help facilitate this, there is an open invitation to our community Discord down in the description. We hope to see you there. Long live the Highlander, and Dunmar Glass.